I agree with the president on this. I think that we've got enough gun laws now, and it's time for us to aggressively enforce the gun laws that we have, which I think we do fairly well here in this state.
The president has made clear that he's not going to use this horrific event to push for new gun laws. I agree.
Now, they're not the only ones saying that now not the time to talk about guns, but others, including New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, they disagree.
I don't understand why the police officers across this country don't stand up collectively and say, we're going to go on strike. We're not going to protect you unless you, the public, through your legislature, do what's required to keep us safe. After all, police officers want to go home to their families. And we're doing everything we can to make their job more difficult, but more importantly, more dangerous by leaving guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have them and letting people who have those guns buy things like armor-piercing bullets. The only reason to have an armor-piercing bullet is to go through a bullet-resistant vest. The only people that wear bullet-resistant vests are our police officers.
Now, I happen to agree with the mayor, and Mr. Bloomberg, by the way, clarified today saying he doesn't literally want the cops to go on strike, but you get the drift. There are over 12,000 gun murders in the U.S. every single year. You can do the math. It turns out to be more than 1,000 every month, 33 every day. And one gun murder occurs in the U.S. every 82.5 minutes. Now, there are more than 31,000 gun deaths on an annual basis. Now, you don't have to look very far to remember the last mass shooting. Tucson, Arizona shooting that left 6 dead. Actually, Gabriella Giffords impaired after that shooting. Virginia Tech shooting left 32 people dead. Jonesboro, Arkansas shooting left 5 dead. And just miles away from last week's shooting in Aurora, the Columbine Massacre that left 13 dead. But others say, hey, now is not the time to talk about legislation when it comes to guns. And that's why we're asking you at home to sound off. There's a disagreement in this country. I think there's a healthy debate about the Second Amendment and what the framers ever intended. And good and decent people can disagree. But the part that I disagree about is that after an incident like we saw in Aurora, that we as a nation should just remain mute on the subject and wait until the next massacre or disaster and say, let's move on yet again. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation at this table, and we're going to bring you into it at home. The toll-free number, 38766-2428. And again, the question that I've been asking you since Friday is it time for America to face that it has a gun problem? I want to introduce our panel tonight here to discuss this. Richard Brodsky, former New York Assemblyman, Senior Fellow at Demos, and Professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Former Representative from Connecticut, Congressman Rob Simmons, and our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. And Andrew, I want to start with you because in the aftermath of this, there was this sense that, hey, you know what, the public really doesn't want to get into it's a time for mourning. And certainly that's true, but there is no real disagreement in the country about this. It's imperfect, but our gun laws are what they are, and we need to move on. But when you dive down in the numbers, you found a more complicated or complex picture, right?
Well, there are areas of agreement, and it looks like there might be some areas for common ground on this debate, Rich. And once again, we're seeing a case of voters giving different answers depending on exactly what they're being asked. When asked in general about gun control and whether to make gun laws more strict, you see the numbers. So that 43% who want stricter gun laws is an all-time low, which would indicate not a lot of support for gun control. But when asked about specific gun measures, we find a lot more agreement. Should the U.S. reinstate the assault weapons ban? 62% say yes. Should gun buyers have to submit to criminal and mental health background checks? 86% say yes. Should the U.S. ban high-capacity ammo magazines or clips? 63% say yes. Should gun purchases be limited over a set time frame, for example, one gun purchase a month? 69% say yes. Should all gun sales and owners be part of a national gun registry? 66% say yes. Finally, should gun sales be banned to people on the nation's terror watch list? 88% say yes. And Rich, another poll came out today of NRA members and found that a lot of similarity among the numbers that you just saw, that even members of the NRA find that common sense moves like gun registries and background checks should be part of the process.
All right, Andrew. Now, during our discussion today, what we're going to do is, no one will ever agree completely on this subject if you bring a large group together, but there, I believe, and maybe I'm naive in this, I believe there actually is some common ground in the middle of this country on the issue. And Andrew gave you some poll numbers to believe that really support that statement. But to do this, I want to drill down on a few key questions here, because no one, or at least no one at this table, says that a person doesn't have a right to bear an arm. And no one's saying that there is the same thing with a Winchester rifle and an AK-47, okay? There are differences in guns, and there's also differences when it comes to ammo and the kind of ammo and some of the related questions. So what I want to do is try and drill it down to a few, and today, just in this segment at least, 2 specific questions. And here's the first one. Should the assault weapons ban be reinstated? Now, this is the assault weapon that James Holmes used here. I want to show it to you, okay? It's an AR-15 assault rifle. If it looks like, you know, an M16, it should, because it's the same exact version that was modified for civilian use. Now, Representative Diana DeGette called for restrictions on assault weapons at a press conference earlier today. Take a listen.
We don't believe that the Second Amendment guarantees somebody the right to walk into a movie theater with a semi-automatic weapon and a 100-round ammo magazine and shoot 71 people. We don't believe that. And we believe that we need to have a national conversation.
Okay. I want to go around the table, and Congressman, I'll start with you. Why should somebody be able to have that gun that I just showed?
Well, the question can also be reversed. Why shouldn't they? If they're an honest person with a sober mind and responsible background and history, why shouldn't they have a weapon of that sort?
Oh, wait, I'll answer your question, and then we'll get into it. Should somebody be able, in your eyes, to walk around to have a bazooka?
It depends on the situation, obviously.
It depends on the situation?
On who they are, and it depends on where they are.
No.
I'm a military officer. I trained in a bazooka at Fort Dix, New Jersey. No
with all
problem
due
with
respect,
that.
I'm a huge fan of yours. I don't want you to have a bazooka. I don't want you to have a rocket launcher.
Yeah,
I don't want you to have that gun.
You asked, Richard, if somebody should have a bazooka. There are people in America today who train on these weapons. That's part of their job. That's part of what they do.
They're in the military. I'm talking about a civilian now.
Yeah, well, I think that I would have problems with that.
Okay, so if you have a problem with a bazooka, you have a line.
But I don't have problems with what you call an assault weapon, because any weapon can be an assault weapon. Okay. You have to define your terms. You have to really figure out what you're talking about.
This is where I think we're getting bogged down. And I want to get into this, because every time we talk about an assault weapon, and again, we had a ban in this country till the law sunset in 2004, okay? We talk about modification. Now, you guys have had this debate. You had this debate when you were in the legislature about gun control. When people talk about modifying weapons, you can take any weapon here and you can modify it into an assault weapon, or the other way around.
If there's a technical objection to the definition of assault weapon, we'll work it out. But that's not what this is about. I'm a great admirer of the congressman's, but you'll forgive me by saying I don't know how to respond to an argument like that. I don't know what will persuade somebody that the civilian population of this country should not have bazookas and machine guns.
Well, I'll get a more basic question. I think you're right. Why do you need it? You want to defend yourself? Get a gun. Why do you need an assault weapon?
I think that from my perspective, the debate needs to take a little bit of a different look. And I think the Wall Street Journal really did a good job this week when they said, how does a free society protect itself from a twisted mind? We get all bogged down in the discussion of equipment, but nobody seems to want to focus on the twisted mind.
I'll tell you exactly how, because we've had a conversation about this, and I think good and decent people can disagree, but to me this is about mitigation. You're never going to stop a crazy person from doing crazy acts, but here's the problem. That guy walked into a theater, and the only reason he stopped firing after 100 was because his clip jammed. And my point is, as a society, we should make it as difficult as possible for the lunatics out there to be able to have, frankly, guns that our own police force don't have. Body armor, armor-piercing bullets. We are off the rails on this. I believe in the right to bear arms, but I have yet, with all due respect, to hear any coherent argument why the gun, if we can show it again, needs to be able to be made available to we the people.
The argument people make is a liberty argument. We should have the freedom as Americans to do that. Okay, that means that you know you're going to pay a price in dead children. And if the liberty interest, the same folks, by the way, who would not permit liberty when it comes to things like pornography or things dealing with gay marriage, that liberty is not going to be transferred. But when it comes to guns, there is a religious and theological view that there is something of the human personality invested in the possession of a gun. I don't care about the technicalities, but I'll tell you this, if you don't change them, we're going to be sitting here again, and there'll be another dead 30 people, and we won't have gone through it unwarned.
Well, and due respect, Congressman, this guy in Colorado, he wanted, obviously, to kill as many people as possible. He used the most high caliber, or he used the most lethal weapon that he had available. Why didn't he use a rocket launcher? Why didn't he use a bazooka? Why didn't he use a grenade? Because he didn't have access to those things. And if he didn't have access to this assault rifle, he might not have been able to kill as many people.
And if he'd been able to light off the gasoline that I understand he had in the theater, he could have killed twice as many. So are we going to put a limit on gasoline?
They were shot and murdered with a gun.
That I understand that, but the point is, I have a trigger finger. So does Dominic, so do you, so does Richard. We all have a trigger finger. Why do I not use my trigger finger to kill people? Because I don't have a twisted mind.
But for those people
and most Americans who are responsible about their ownership of firearms don't have a twisted mind. It's the twisted mind
that trigger
that
finger
kills
becomes a lot
people.
deadlier.
All right?
Guys,
It's a lot
I'm
more
holding
lethal.
here.
So my question is,
you have a great prop, which is the American Constitution, okay? And I joke around, but what's one of the things I respect about you, because you believe in the document and everything attached to it. Well, this is my prop today. This thing, okay, is the amount of mass shootings that we've had just since 2005 in this country. Now, I know the five of us all find these abhorrent, innocent people mowed down, whether it be in urban, rural, suburban settings, whether it's in schools, whether it's in movie theaters, or all points in between. But for crying out loud, how much more evidence do we need to have that this is crazy? And there are crazy, disturbed people out there that are going to do bad things, and that it's our responsibility as a population to try and mitigate that. Now, we talk about the guns, but there's also what goes in them. And this is the second question for you. Should citizens be allowed to stockpile ammo? I'm not talking about some ammo. James Holmes, again, that lunatic in Colorado, he purchased a high-capacity drum-style ammo clip and 6,000 rounds of ammo online. And how many questions was he asked? Zippo. ABC's Pierre Thomas demonstrated just how easy it is to do just that.
If I wanted to buy some tactical gear, I could go online and buy some body armor, ballistic helmets, or whatever else I wanted. In most states, buying ammo is just as easy. Holmes allegedly bought 6,000 rounds on this site. So I'm trying to buy 10 times that much, 60,000 rounds of ammo for an assault rifle. I'm already up to payment information, and I haven't had to provide any documentation or to look anyone in the eye.
Now, on this show about a month ago, we had the Attorney General of New York, who successfully, after a lot of work, got past basically a mandate that anybody who wants to get prescription drugs in the state of New York, you couldn't basically go pharmacy shopping. You had to, every pharmacist had to keep a database of every purchaser that came in with a script. So they found out that people couldn't go shopping everywhere. I got a stupid question. If somebody wants to get Vicodin, for crying out loud, and they're going to be in a database every time they do it, and nobody has a hue and cry about their civil liberties being infringed, then why the heck can somebody just go buy a drum of ammo here to fire 100 bullets in one without letting go of that trigger finger you described? How is that not also of a national security interest, let alone a safety interest for all of us?
In some states you can, in some municipalities you can, and in others you cannot. My question to you is, why don't we have these mass murder situations in a country like Taiwan, the Republic of China? Because there's law enforcement. You commit the capital crime, you're disposed of. Absolutely. Why do you not have these problems in mainland China?
Lunatic would care if he was killed?
You have a capital crime, there's law enforcement.
80-odd murders in England every year.
Is England,
England has no capital punishment.
We don't have any mechanism to put these people away.
English law enforcement.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen in England.
It's a liberal ideology about these crimes that we have spent more time trying to figure out what the problem is with this lunatic.
Can I take a picture,
than
guys?
we have.
Can you bring up for all of us here at the table what you have in the rear projector, if I could, so I can get a shot here of the perpetrator of this? If we could, thank you very much. I want you, Congressman, to take a look at this guy.
Why does he have red hair?
1 second.
Why does he have red hair?
Because he's insane.
He has
He's
a First
insane.
Amendment right.
That's
he
correct.
has red.
Okay.
He's
No,
crazy.
let's not get into
Because he
First
has red
Amendment.
hair?
Okay.
Crazy.
No.
Wait a minute.
Please, no, I don't want to get off the rails here. What I'm trying to say is, show it up again, please.
The Joker.
I'm begging you.
His mind is twisted by a Hollywood character.
Time out. I agree with everything you say, except do you think he cares if there was a death penalty?
Oh, I think he does.
Oh, do you think he wouldn't have gone to that theater?
And I'll tell you exactly why I think he does. Because he had a neck guard, he had body armor, he had leg armor, he had armor to protect his groin area. And I think that if he'd walked into that theater and saw a couple of National Guard people in the lobby or an armed policeman, he would have thought twice about whether he would have carried that out.
So a minute ago he was a crazy person with a trigger finger. Now he's a sane person.
No, I'm not saying he's sane, but he was obviously worried about his own personal protection.